Hi, this is Mr. New, and welcome to another episode of Illustrator for EastTech. In this episode, we are going to be experimenting with the lines and shape tools as well as stacking orders. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and open up Illustrator, and I am going to create a new document. Once again, I want to make sure that this new document is print-based. Click OK. The first thing I want to bring up is the line tool. The line tool is right over here underneath the type tool. If I click on that and hold it down, notice I have 5 different tools out there. I'm going to go ahead and pull the tear out on it so I have it here handy. And the first thing I want to do is make sure I have line segment tool selected. And all I need to do for the line segment tool is click, drag, and I can create a line from the point where I started to drag to the point where I'm at right now. And when I let go, I have a line. Now, so it's easier to see, I'm going to go ahead and change the stroke value of my lines. Let's bump them up to 6. We'll go ahead and leave them black for right now, and we won't worry about a fill color. A few things you can do, however, with the line tool. There are certain modifier keys that work. If I click and drag, for instance, and I hold the space bar down, I can move this to a new location. If I hold the shift key, it constrains my line to 45-degree angles. I can let go and now I have a perfect 45-degree angle. Another thing I can do with this is if I click and drag, if I hold Option, it will actually draw from a center point. So where my point is, it will draw out from there centered. I can still use the Shift key to constrain this to 45-degree angles as well. And last but not least, if I just do a mouse click, it will actually give me the last line I created. The one line I had just created was a 270-degree angle at a length of 170 points. I can change this or leave it alone. If I leave it alone, it will create the exact same segment in a new position where I had clicked. So that basically is the line tool. I'm going to get rid of a couple of these lines only because I want more room for my drawings. And you will probably do the same. I'm going to keep 2 of these lines. Then I can click and drag and move these up and over to the side so they're out of the way. I'm now going to go to the arc tool. The arc tool, when I click and drag, will form an arc. If I pull it up and over, it will flip that direction. If I pull it down, it'll flip below. If I hold the shift key down, it will constrain the arc to a 45-degree angle from my first point to my second point. Notice how the width and the height are identically the same. If I hold the space bar down, it will allow me to move it around. And if I hit the up and down arrows, I can change the curvature of that arc. So let's go with about that curvature right about there. And I'll let go, and I've drawn that one. I will click my selection tool and move it up over here for a second. There are a few things else you can do. One is as I draw an arc, I may want an open or a closed arc. That means that it's going to form almost a pie shape. If I hit the letter C, it now has closed off that arc. If I hit it again, it goes back. So C will toggle between closed and non-closed. Once again, holding the shift key down constrains it. Let go, I now have a closed arc. If I actually select that, I can add a fill color. In fact, I want to start adding some fill colors right now because I'm going to be doing something with those later. And let me click on that. If I decided to put a fill color in here, notice it goes straight across from the 2 points. It will not form that pie shape. And once again, if I do a single mouse click, it will want to draw the last arc I had created. So I hit OK, and now I have the exact arc again. This one does not have a fill. I'll go ahead and add a fill color to that one. Let's get a little crazy with that. That looks good. Push that one up over here out of the way. Next is the spiral tool. With the spiral tool, there's a number of options we can do with that as well. If I click and drag, it forms a spiral. If I press the command key while I drag, it will constrain the 2 points and the number of segments, and it will stretch that out. So basically what it's doing is it's keeping the exact same number of segments within that shell, within that spiral, but it's stretching it out. I'll let go of the command. If I do the up and down arrows, down arrow will remove segments, up arrow will add segments. If I hold the Option key down and pull, it actually adds more segments within there. So if I change this to say 1 point, we're going to notice that spiral goes way deep in there. In fact, when I do a single click on my spiral tool, we're going to notice that we have 137 segments that were created. That's an awful lot of segments to deal with. Let's change that to about 20 and hit OK. And now we have one with 20. It looks similar, but we can definitely see it ends where this one keeps going down. I'm going to get rid of a couple of these. I'll keep this one right here, and I'll pull it back over to my artboard. And if I do a fill color on this, it actually cuts it off right at the edge of that spiral. Next, we have the grid tool. Let's go ahead and make a grid. If I pull that out, I have a grid. I'm still holding my mouse down. If I hold the up and down arrows, the up arrow will add more rows, or less rows if I go the other direction. So the up and down arrow will add rows. The left and right arrows will take away and add columns. There's a couple of other really nice features as well. If I hit the X key, it will skew everything over to the left. The C key will skew everything to the right. The F key will skew down. The V key will skew everything up. So you have the X, C, and the FV to skew your lines for your grids. Once again, I can hit the space bar and move that. And if I hold the Shift key, it will constrain it to a perfect square. I'll go ahead and let go of that one right there. And let's go ahead and add color to that as well. Let's turn that one yellow. And if I hit a single mouse click, I will actually be able to recreate a whole new grid on the same parameters I had before. But let's go ahead and delete that. Okay, last tool that I'm going to bring up for this set of tools is the Polar Grid tool. Polar Grid works very similar to the rectangle grid in the fact that, once again, I have a grid work that this one's based on circles. If I hold the Shift key down, it constrains it to a perfect circle. If I hit the up and down arrow, it will add and subtract the inner circles. If I do a left and right, it will subtract or add pie-shaped grids to my grid work. And once again, if I hit the X, it will skew it to the center. If I hit the C, it will skew it to the outside. The F and the V also work. It will skew either to one side or the other, but I'm going to leave it right about like that so it looks like we're looking down on top of a globe. And I'll give that a color, and I will move that up into my area up here. So those are our line tools. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. Now we are now going to look at our shape tools. Once again, we have 6 tools out here and a tear off. So I'm going to tear that off now so I can play with that. We have a rectangle tool, a rounded rectangle tool, an ellipse tool, polygon, star, and a flare tool. We'll start with the rectangle tool, and if I click and drag, once again, I form a square. Hold the Shift key, it constrains it to a perfect square. Hit the Option key, it draws from a center point. Shift key allows me to move it around. And if I do a single mouse click, it will allow me to recreate the exact shape I had before, or I can type in new parameters to make it more exact. Say if I wanted it at 150 by 150, I now have a perfect square at 150 points. I'll delete the last one. Let's change the color of this one. And I'm going to thicken up that stroke again. Let's make it about a 6-point stroke, and let's make the stroke dark blue. So I will drag and move that up into my pictures here. Next is the rounded rectangle tool. This one has a lot of the same parameters as the rectangle tool, such as Shift constrains it to a perfect square, space allows me to move, Option draws from the center. We do have a couple of other options, however. Our arrow keys. If I hit the left arrow key, I get a maximum sharpness to the corners. A right arrow key gives me maximum roundness to the corners. And then the up and down arrows will make changes. So a down arrow will gradually reduce the sharpness, and a up arrow will make them more rounded. Let's go ahead and change that one up. We don't have green yet. Let's make a green one. Dark green stroke. And let's try the ellipse tool. Same thing with the ellipse. You can hold the Shift key to make it a perfect circle, Option key to draw from the center, space to move it, and that's basically the circle, very similar to the others. We've got A Polygon Tool. Polygon Tool has some options that we haven't quite seen yet here. If I pull the Polygon Tool out, I can use the up and down arrows to change the points. So up arrow gives me more, down arrow gives me fewer, and the Shift key will constrain it to a specific shape. The space will allow me to move, so I'm going to go ahead and constrain it, and we're going to turn this into a stop sign, so a nice bright red for the fill. And if I was to do a single mouse click, it will allow me to make the exact one same as always, or I can change up the sides or the radius. I'll cancel that for now. Last of the major tools here is the star tool. The star tool is kind of interesting. I'll draw over here on the other artboard for a minute. When I click and draw the star tool, it starts out with a basic 5-pointed star. If I hold the Shift key down, it constrains it to where I can't turn it. If I hold the space bar, I can move. The Option key will constrain the shoulders of the star, so it looks more like the star we have on the American flag. Let me go ahead and draw that star, and I'll push it up out of the way for a second. I'll do another star right now, and as I do this star, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold the Command key down. Now watch what happens to the inner points of the star versus the outer points of the star. If I hold the Command key down and drag, the inner points are constrained and the outer points will actually stretch out. You can even move them inwards if I wanted to. So what the Command key does is constrain the outer points of the star. Now, if I push the up and down arrow, I can add or take away points of the star. So I can add as many points as the star as I want to. I'll leave it right there. So now I have this really cool looking sunburst type of a star out there. All right. Now, last but not least, we have our flare tool. This flare tool is kind of an interesting animal. Please do not overuse this. If I click and drag, I get this little starburst looking thing. I can use the arrow keys to take away or add some of those bursts. If I click again, and then I click out of it, I get this really crazy looking starburst. And I can put that right on top of my entire image, and it now adds this really interesting flare over everything. The starburst is kind of an interesting thing, and I'll let you play with that at will. The last thing I want to talk about is stacking order. I have this really interesting image now, but I might want to rearrange how everything fits. In fact, right off the bat, I think I'm going to move that starburst over so I can see more of my images. Now, I can click on any particular image and go up to Object, Arrange, and then either go to Bring to Front, Bring Forward, Send Backwards, or Send to Back. And I can send that to any particular point within my image. I'll send that back a few times. Now, if you notice too, there are shortcuts. I can just go ahead and use the Command bracket to send it back. In fact, I'll do that right now. I'll do a Command bracket, and now it's starting to disappear behind the objects. And if I click here, let's see where it falls. So right now it's behind these two objects. Now I can do that with each one of these objects, but that can be really time consuming. And we're all about time here. So what I want to show you is if I go over here to Layers, and then next to the layers I have this little triangle. I'm going to click on that triangle. And notice I have all of my objects represented out here on the right. And this is the actual stacking order. Notice the last thing I created was the flare, and the flare is actually on the very top. I'm going to click, drag the flare. I'm going to drag the flare all the way to the bottom. So my flare's at the bottom. Let's say I want this green shape on the top. That's this one right here. I can push it all the way to the very top, and now it pops up on the top. I can rearrange all of these images to be in different positions. So whatever position I want them in, I can move them. The last two things I want to point out about the layers is we could turn layers on and off by clicking on this little eye next to them. Take a look at that green rounded rectangle, and if I click on the eye, it disappears. If I click on it again, it comes back. Now next to it, there's an empty box. If I click on that, it will lock that particular stacking order object. So I can lock those objects. We will talk more about what the advantages are of locking and unlocking objects later, But for now, what I want you to do is go ahead and create an image using all of these pieces. I want you to play around with the stacking order. So that's it for this episode, and we'll see you on the next one.